All right, so we created this index method that just goes to /polls /, and this is what it responds to with. So let's keep building on that. So when I go to polls/1, I want it to display the individual poll or go to an individual poll. So if we look at the Django docs or this thing, you're going to get used to doing this. You're going to build out the URL that you want, and then build out the view method that you want. And then once we get the templates, we'll do that as well. So we're going to just build out all the URLs and the views first for this tutorial. All right. So first, if we want to go to polls/1, we want to go to the path. This is where if we're using an integer or a number that our URL pattern looks at, we need to go to the integer, and we can call this whatever we want, but we want to know what this number is associated with. And it's associated with each individual question. So it's going to be question_ID, and that's going to look at the views method, and it's going to be a detail method because it's looking at each individual question a little more in depth. Detail. And we're going to do a name, detail, just to keep things easy. And so now here, for this index, we have to create a detail method. And this detail method takes in the request, but it also takes in whatever this is as well, because this is like almost like a variable. So it takes also in the question ID as well. And in here, we're just going to return an HTTP response saying you are looking at question ID. So if I come over here and now look at question 1, it's not showing anything. Whoop. Does anybody know why it's not finding it? So it says, I'm getting an error using the URL like config defines in my site URLs, tried the following, it tried these ones. The current path polls / this did not match any of these. So I think it's because I didn't add that trailing /. There we go. So it says you're looking at question 1.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
Where you have question _ID, why is it _ID and not like .id?
So this part right here on inside the views.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
So yeah, with this we can call whatever we want.
Okay.
And all that's doing is reading from here. Oh, I guess not.
I think the path has to also be named that.
So the path also has to be named this as well. Okay, so that's something new I learned. So it's because we called this whatever we want. So if we called this whatever we want, then it should still work. And it's just reading up here what it's passing this value into this detail method.
Okay, so maybe I'm just not understanding. How is it knowing that it's the number 1, like position 1?
Well, it's because I'm going to the URL 1. If I'm going to the URL 6, it literally just reads whatever inside the
Okay.
URL. It's looking for this
Mhm.
integer, whatever is there.
Mhm.
And right there, it's 6. So it's passing 6 into this detail method. And now it's just displaying whatever we want, which is that.
Okay.
So it's literally taking whatever we're typing in the URL and passing
Mhm.
that into this value or into this method.
Okay.
And it's expecting a number. That's why it's an integer looking for whatever we want. But we're specifically going to be looking for a question ID. So let's call that a question ID. Does that make sense?
For some reason, it's just not getting it. It's not clear to me.
No,
still,
yeah.
but-
So
Okay.
when I go to like anything I want, like whatever, I can go to like slash anything. It will pass this anything, this value, it's called anything, into this detail method. And so that's why it's displaying whatever that question ID is.
Okay.
So it's think of
I
it as
guess
that it's coming
Mhm.
here, it's going to polls/1. It's grabbing this
Okay.
question ID, which corresponds to 1 right here, and it's passing that into this detail method as an argument.
Okay, and I guess where I'm getting confused is I'm not quite sure how it's knowing that that's question ID number 1. Like, where's it getting it from?
So it's not
Sorry.
necessarily, it doesn't know anything about the question ID, but it knows the value. It's because I'm literally typing it in the URL.
Okay.
So it's just because literally I can type in anything I want right here, like some big number.
Okay. Okay. It just clicked. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And so
I understand now.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So
Awesome.
it could be whatever number. If you type 6 or something, it would be question number 6.
Yep.
Like if you, okay, got
Yep.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we have the detail method, but there's a couple other routes we want to also create, which is as when a user goes to like an individual here polls, it'll see like a list of questions. If I go to question 1, it'll have a bunch of different questions that are choices I can choose from. And I can also click on that question or click on that choice and vote for it. And after I vote for it, I can also see the results of that poll. So I'm going to create 2 more URLs. I'm going to create, if I go to /polls/ whatever the question is /results. So /results. So it grabs the question ID followed by the results, and it's going to show the results. So I'll have to also display. I'm going to create a results method. Results, which also takes in a question ID because the question ID is inside of the URL. You're looking at question 1 results. So if I refresh that, everything still works. If I go to results, you're looking at question 1 results. And the last one I want to do is if I go to polls/1/vote, I want to vote on question 1. Let's call it a vote. And when I go to this method or go to this URL and go to this question ID, I'm going to be voting on that. You're voting on question ID. That needs to be an F string. So now if I go to vote, you're voting on question one. If there's like 1,000 like questions in the like hundreds or millions of questions inside of the database, I can vote on whatever question is associated with this ID. All right. So I've created all my methods or view methods, and I've created all my routes or my URLs. But this isn't really that interesting. I wanted to display something that we are already kind of familiar with, and that is HTML. So if they come over here and look at here, we go to our URLs, we go to our views, but our views are just responding with an HTTP response right now. But we want to go into and build out our templates. And this is all the HTML, and this is just what we actually will see on the screen. So I'm going to close out our models, close out our settings. I'm even going to close out our URLs. I'll just close out everything. And inside of our Django app polls, I'm going to create another directory inside of there called templates. And inside of my templates folder, I'm going to create another directory, which is going to be called the name of our app, which is polls. And inside of this polls directory, I'm going to create all my templates that are associated with each route I visit. So when I go to polls, this index, I want it to display a specific HTML template. Let's go ahead and open up our views one more time. So when I go to here, I want it to actually display question one. So inside of our polls, I'm going to create an HTML file called index.html. And I'm going to actually write some HTML in here. H1, all polls, because I actually want to in this index, I don't want it to display the individual question. I want it to display all of the questions. So all polls are all poll questions. So you should be relatively familiar with HTML right now, and we're going to keep on expanding on this HTML. But there is a way we can write Python within HTML, and that is through a library called Jinja, Jinji, kind of like ninja, but it's called Jinja. And it's already installed for us when we installed Django. So we don't have to do any pip install Jinja or anything like that. But there's a way we can actually write Python inside of HTML. And it kind of looks a little weird, and it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense relative to how you've been learning Python. But in here, I'm going to say, if latest question list. So here I'm doing an if block, just like you would in Python. But the difference is with each if block or each block of code, I have to do an end if. I have to actually explicitly say, hey, when does this block of code, this if statement end? So I'm just going to copy and paste some code and to expand on this. So if the latest question list, so I'm saying, hey, if there's a question, I'm creating an unordered list, and it's going to loop through the question so each question in the question list. And I'm going to create a link to it that has the question text. And if there aren't any questions, so if there's nothing in my database, it's going to say no polls are available. Any questions right now we're going to keep on going, and I'll come back to this one.
I'm
So
guessing
you-
we're gonna.
Go ahead, Guillermo.
Okay, I'm guessing we're gonna have to use a little bit of this markdown language for markup language for our assessment on Friday. Correct.
You're going to have to use markup language, like,
We're gonna have to be familiar with this this markup language a little bit for our for
Yes.
our next assessment next week.
correct. Yes, you will.
Okay.
Susan? You're on mute.
Um,
Sorry.
I was wondering why you need both folders, both the templates and the polls folder within the templates. Is that just a convention or is that actually necessary?
I think that's the convention, because once we expand on this Django project and as it expands, you're going to see templates outside of the Django app as well. So it's just general convention.
So Jinja is already installed with Django. Is there any kind of an import that we need to do?
Nope. So we're good. So we don't have to do anything else with regards to Jinja other than kind of know the syntax of it. So when I display, so how do I get this index.html file to display when I visit index, or when I visit just polls right here? Well, I can do that by inside of this index directory. I can render, instead of rendering or responding with an HTTP response of a string, I can return with a render. And this render takes in 3 positional arguments. It takes in the request, it takes in the template that we want to render, and that is coming from the polls directory within the templates directory, index.html. And it also responds, or the third argument needs to be a dictionary. So right now I'm just going to give it an empty dictionary. So it takes in the request, takes in the path to this index, whatever template we're using. So it's looking directly into the templates folder, and we're going to go into the polls directory and grab the index.html file. So if I did everything correctly, well, and then it also takes in a dictionary. And we're going to be adding to this dictionary. So if I refresh that, hopefully it all works. Notice how we see all polls, no polls are available. So it comes in here, says it's displaying this H1 tags. It's saying, hey, if latest question list, so if there's a latest question list being passed in here, then display this. Otherwise, we have this else block, else display a paragraph tag, no polls are available, and then end the block. So in here, we're not passing in. So that's what this dictionary is for, is when we're passing in data. So if I wanted to pass in all the questions, question list, how do I grab all the questions from the database?
Questions.all.
Question.objects.all. So again, this is just a simple Django query. But I'm getting squiggly line under question because I haven't imported my question model class into this view. So I can do from models, let's import question. And while we're at it, let's also import choice. So I've got this question list. And here, I can pass this question list as a dictionary. So if you notice in my index.html file, it's looking for a key called latest question list. So I'm going to create, so on this dictionary here, I can create a key called latest question list. and add it to question underscore list. But this needs to be a string like that. So if I wanted to print question list like that, and let's go ahead and save it. And I'm just going to refresh this. Notice down here when I'm printing on line 8, it's showing up down here in the terminal. And this question set is a query list with question ID. So it's only got one question in there. But I'm assigning it to a dictionary or as a value on a dictionary with a key called latest question list. But now if I look over here, you can kind of see, or you can see the individual question. What's everyone doing this weekend? Another thing, just to break it apart a little bit more, I'm going to create a data dictionary with essentially this right here. And in place of this, I'm going to just pass in data, because data is a dictionary with latest question list. Or I can even just say, yeah, or just like question underscore list. And then over here, it's going to look for a question list. There we go. So if I refresh it, same thing. So what's happening is when I visit that polls, let's go back here. When I visit that polls /, it looks in the views, goes into the index method inside the views, looks inside the index method, runs this method, grabs all the questions from the database, assigns it to this question list variable. I'm creating a data dictionary with a question list key on it. I'm also assigning that value to this question list query set. And now it's rendering the polls index.html file, and I'm passing in that data dictionary. And now it's coming over here saying, hey, if there's a key called question list on this data dictionary, that's great. Then it's looping through this query set, which is an array. So for each question object in the question list, display the question text. So that's what this is for doing. Questions about that?
Tom, it's a bit unrelated, but with your imports, you have an import that's a .models import question choice. So with OOP, I think we had to do something like polls.models. So is that something that's just a shortcut that we can transfer back to OOP, or is that something that's specific to
That's
Django?
That's specific to Django. So inside of the views, it's saying, hey, look inside of the models directory, or I'm sorry, the models file, and then import. I can import whatever I want in here.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a link, and when I click this link, it takes me to question 1. So if I look over here where it's taking me, it's this href, this is a link, polls, and I can add Python directly into here. So if I'm displaying text from a Python object, I use double brackets. If I'm doing like if statements and everything outside of a HTML tag, I use a bracket followed by the %sign. So when I click that link, it goes to polls question ID. So it goes to polls question ID is 1. That's why it took me to this link.
Tom,
Yep.
back in your code on the left-hand side, for the render function on line 9, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Render, that last argument is a dictionary.
Correct.
So we could theoretically pass like multiple key value pairs in a dictionary. It doesn't just have to be like one thing. And in this case, the value associated with our key is an entire query set of its own, like it's its own data structure that we're passing to it. And we can't just pass the query set because a query set is not a dictionary. Is that right? Like we couldn't just pass the query set.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And I can also say like H1, like so here, what you were saying, if I go back here and refresh, you get my name is Tom here. It's because I've got this key called hello, and the value is my name is Tom. And right here on line 11, inside my index template, I'm rendering the value of hello, which is my name is Tom. So yeah, you can add multiple values or keys with values on this.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
All right. So we've got the index. Now let's keep going down to the detail as well. So the general path that we want you to like, the routine is to write one URL, write the view method for it, write the template for it, write the URL pattern for that, write the view method associated with that URL pattern, write the template for it. So we've already done all the detail. We've already written all the URL patterns for it. Now we just have to build out all the templates for it. But going forward, write your URL pattern, build out the index or the view method, then build out the template, then just keep on repeating that pattern. So we want to go ahead and do the detail. So just like we're doing up here with the question, we just want to grab the question.objects.get by ID equals question ID, like that. And then we can just do data, and we can just do the individual question and pass in that question in there. And in here, we're going to want to render the request, the polls /detail.html file, and we're going to pass that data into it. But we don't have that detail HTML file created yet. So let's go ahead and create it. Whoop. Detail.html. All right. So in here, we're going to go, let's do H1 question. What is it? What am I passing in there? So I'm passing in question. I can do question.id. So question detail page. And I can do H2. Question text. Kind of see that. And now, if I wanted to display all the choices associated with that question, I can do for choice in question.choices.all. So I'm running a Django query within my HTML file, my HTML template. But notice how I'm not calling it, like invoking it. I'm just running a question.choices.all. And since this, I need an end for to end this for loop block of code. And in here, I'm going to create a list. I'm going to grab each choice choice underscore text. So for choice I'm grabbing all the choices associated with this question. I'm displaying the choice text. So if I come back here, do a refresh and click that. Question 1 detail page. What's everyone doing this weekend? Going to the UT game, watching football. I'm sleeping this weekend. Any questions on that? Nope. All right. Now let's go to, let's see. What do we want to do now? So I just kind of want to show you for this URL pattern. When I talked about this is called the named route. But when I'm going to here, I'm essentially hard coding this. But there's an easier way. Because what if maybe the route changes? What if I decided to change my URL pattern or change something in here? But I still want this link to take me to the detail page. But what I can do is make as I said, a named route. So what this looks like, I can go look at the URL, go to the detail page, and then pass in the question.id. And if I do that and refresh it, if I refresh that, it still takes me there. So with the href, it's saying, hey, look for a URL, a named route in the URL file named detail, and pass in that question ID to the URL pattern. So here it says, look in the URL, look for a named route called detail and pass in that question ID. So it comes over here, looks for a named route called detail and passes that question ID into this and it takes me here and then runs this detail method. Also, where I see people get stuck sometimes is not having spaces. Like that's going to break it. If I don't have a space here, that will break. If I have a space there, that will break. All right.
And this kind of stuff is on the Jinja documentation website, like that whole URL thing, because that's like a special thing, right? This is it. You have to have the URL keyword and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yep.
it's just one of those things.
Yep. And now also, you don't necessarily need to do this, but this could be helpful if you're building out your Django project that has multiple apps. In my URLs, folder or file in my Django app, I can have an app name and I can name this app called polls. But when I do that, when I reference a named route, I need to add that polls : detail to that. You don't have to do that, but just in case you build out your app or your Django project to have multiple apps, and multiple apps might have a detail page in it or might have a named route in it called detail. So you don't have to do that, but just want to let you know that you could also do that. All right. So let's go ahead and refactor.
Hey, Tom, I'm sorry, real quick. Could you go to your models page real quick? I just wanted to check something. I know that's been.
Bring that up there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so let's go ahead. So I'm at this detail page, but I can't really, I want to like be able to select what I want, what's everyone doing this weekend. If I wanted to select between these three, I really can't right now. So I'm going to refactor the detail page to include a form. And maybe any error messaging. So if I do that again and I refresh, let's take a look. I might get an error. Yep. Right here. So vote. Let's see if I'm still going to get an error. Cool. So now I actually have some radials I can select like so, and maybe vote on it. But let's take a look at what this is doing. So in H1, again, I'm just looking at the question ID, the question text. I'm saying if there's any error messages or if like something happens, which we'll build out. If something happens, we can build that out. But in this form, notice how in this form I have an action, and this action is saying, hey, where do you want me to send my choice to? And right here it's saying, hey, send it to the URL vote named route, which is here. Right here. Let's take a look at what else it's telling us to do. The type of method in this form is a post because I'm saving something to the database. It's a post request. And I'm sending the data to that vote method, that vote view right here, which I haven't done anything with yet. And also I have this thing here called CSRF_token. This is required when you're dealing with forms in Django and Jinja. And it's a CSRF token. It's a security token. It essentially adds a bunch like a hash to the form when you're submitting it to make sure that no one's hacked your form yet. And this is required. If I got rid of that and saved it and did a refresh and click that and vote, I'll get an error. Forbidden CSRF verification failed, request aborted. So it's saying, hey, your CSRF token is missing or it's incorrect. That means it doesn't know where this data is coming from. So I need to verify it by adding the CSRF token. And then in here, I just have an input for the radial choice counter. So I'm just adding an ID to it. And the value of that input is that choice ID. And now this is the label for that choice. Yeah. And now I have that N4. And now I also have the submit button that says vote for wherever I'm voting for. So if I refresh this, go to UT and I vote. Let's take a look at what's happening here. So I can print the question ID right there, like so. So when I click that form, it's going to the vote method. So do that again. So I'm going to be watching football. Let's actually just refresh. I might be sleeping this weekend. I'm going to vote. If I look down here, there I get that question ID. So in this, I can extract. Let's actually take a look at this. So notice how we've been adding the request to each, we're passing in the request. Let's take a look at what that request looks like. So if I go back, refresh, vote, I get this WSGI request it's a post request. And I'm going to that URL. If I do request.post, let's take a look at inspect that post. So I'm going to submit that again. And now you can see a query dicts. This is what's on that post request. You got that CSRF token, that middleware token, and that's what is being added to that form right here. It also has this value or this key called choice with a value of 1. And that's where that name is coming from. I'm adding this choice to this input. And the value is that choice ID. And that's what this is. That's what that is. So if I go back again and refresh, and maybe I want to going to the UT game, I think that was ID 3, I believe. If I vote on that, I come down here, I can see that choice with an ID of 3. So now I can grab that choice from that query dictionary. And I can, so if I refresh it, I get that 3 of what I'm voting for, what choice I'm voting for. So if I have access to that ID, now the choice ID, now I can do some stuff to it.
Could you explain the role of the CSRF token and like how it starts there in the Jinja thing and makes its way through?
I don't know exactly how it makes its way through and is added to the post, the request, but it's needed there for that security reason, as to verify that that form is secure and it's coming from where you're requesting it from.
So is that just a kind of boilerplate thing every time you do a post request?
Anytime you make any request, you need that CSRF token there. And that's specific to Django and specific to Django templates.
Could you inspect the form page just to see where it is?
I don't even know if you can see it on there.
Back where you had the form showing.
Yep. So,
But whenever you access this, it generates a new token for you for that page. And that token gets sent along with the rest of the form to verify that it was you on this page who just sent
Okay.
that
I
form
think
back.
it's too in the weeds a little bit, but like, so that prevents someone from like doing a manual post request pretending to be a different user.
yep. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So in this vote, so I'm able to extract what choice I voted for. Now in here, I can actually grab the question and grab the choice is associated with that question, and then grab that choice, like the choice I actually selected. So I'm going to grab that question by doing or what was it? Question dot objects dot get, where ID equals question ID. Like so. And now I can do a try except. Try. So in this try, I can grab the selected choice equals question dot choices dot get, and I can grab the ID and I can grab that request. Whoop. Let's do that. Request dot post choices, or is it choice? Except. So if I get an error, just grab a key error. I'm doing choice. This is all in the documentation. You don't have to do it this way, but it's just good just in case of what if you're trying to submit a choice that does not is not on a question. I can return, render, and this is just where the error handling is. Request, polls, /detail. So if I get an error, I'm going to re-render the detail page. Question, and I'm getting an error message. You didn't select choice. So that's where that error message is. So if an error message belongs on this render, then it will display that error message. Else, meaning if there isn't an error message, meaning the selected choice exists, then selected choice dot votes. I can increase my votes in my selected choice object, and I can save it to the database. And now I can reroute myself. Instead of going to this vote page, I can go to the results page. Render the request. Actually, it's not even render, it's HTTP response. Do I have a response redirect? So I'm redirecting myself to reverse, going to the polls, results. I don't even know if the args question ID. There's another way to do this, but this also works. This is probably the best way to do it. So I'm going to have to import HTTP response redirect is right there. And do I need to do reverse as well? So let's just see what's happening here. Oh. Reverse. Need one more. So let's see what's going on here. When I click this, going to the UT game, and I click vote. Uh-oh, what happened? Question object has no attribute IED. Where did that come from? Uh-oh. So let's go back and vote again. Reverse is not a registered namespace. Where's it going? So it looks like polls results. It's trying to go to the results page. Why isn't that working?
Because you've got the namespace on there and you don't need it because you didn't include that.
Wait, say that again.
You have the namespace polls as in like an app name, and you don't need it here.
Thank you.
You didn't do that.
So let's go back. And let's just do refresh. Uh-oh, type error polls vote value after must be iterable, not int. What the hell? Let's see. There we go. So what is happening when I click select a choice and click submit, it takes me to the URL vote named route right here. And it runs through the vote method. So it takes here, takes me to this vote method, passes in the question ID. I grab that question ID from the database and I grab all the choices from that are associated with that question. I run a query get on that. I'm grabbing the ID by the choice of what I selected from that post request. So that's my selected choice there. And so if I get it, if it successfully selects a choice from there, it goes down to here, this else statement, and increases my votes on that selected choice object by 1. And then I save that to the database, and it does this HTTP response redirect. So it redirects me to a totally different page. And I can't remember what this reverse does. Ankur, do you remember what this reverse does? He's there. It takes me to the results named route. So it takes me to the results page, and I'm passing in that question ID as an argument right there. So that's why it's taking me to the question 1 results page. If I get an error on it, so if I go to, if I just click vote, notice how I get an error. You didn't select a choice because it came into here. So I voted on it, but I didn't actually pass in anything. I tried to query something that does not exist because I didn't select a choice. It gave me a key error, choice does not exist, and it returned me to the detail page with the question. So it still knows I'm on question 1 because I'm passing that question as an object, but I'm also passing in this error message. And this error, if this error message does exist, it will display an error message. And the last thing I need to do is generate the results page. So coming over here, I can results question dot objects dot
Hey,
get.
Tom, I have a question.
Yep.
Can you explain the try except else, like how it goes, the progression of that? Because I kind of don't understand how that works.
So it'll first come into this try block. It'll try to execute all the code in here. And if there's any errors whatsoever, it'll jump down here into this except block. And you can have multiple except blocks based off of what type of error you're looking for. But typically there's one, you can just do except, like exception, but this one's looking for a key error. So if there's an error in here at all, it'll run this code right here. If there isn't any errors in here, it'll drop down to this else block and just run this at the very end.
Okay,
And-
that makes sense. I was trying to read it as an if else, and that wasn't making sense in my head. But the way you explained it makes sense.
Okay. And there's other blocks in here. There's finally as well. This will always run no matter what happens. But it's very rarely used. But yeah, that's the try except. So after I vote, it goes to the results page. So I need to grab all the results to this question. So I can return, just like I'm doing here, return render. I can render the request. And I'm going to render the polls / results .html. And I can also do that data equals question. Now you could do all this right inside of this part, but I just like to keep things separate. So it runs this results HTML template, passes in this data dictionary. Come over here. I'm going to create the results.html page. And I'm just going to copy some code in here. So details about this question ID displays the question text, and then it goes through for the choice in the question dot choices dot all, so it grabs all the choices. It loops through with each choice, shows the choice text, shows the choice the number of votes, and if the vote is plural, so if votes is pluralized, then it'll say like 1 vote or 2 votes. This is a Jinja thing right here. This pluralized, there's count, there's some other things. And at the very end, I've got this href that says vote again, and it'll take me to the detail page of the question ID. So if I go to all the polls, click what's everyone doing this weekend, I'm going to be watching football. I vote. Now you can see how many people voted. Vote again. I'm going to be sleeping. Vote increased by 1. Vote again. Someone else came in here and voted that they're sleeping. Now voting, I'm sleeping this weekend is increased by 2. So there is a full stack Django app right there. I know we covered a lot, and we're going to keep on building upon this. And we're going to just keep on repeating this over and over and over and over and over again. So if you didn't get everything the first time, it's totally okay. I literally just kind of went through the tutorial page in the curriculum. I left some things out that just for the sake of time. If you notice how I'm doing this objects.question ID 3 different times, maybe I can break that out into a helper function that literally just grabs a question by their question ID. Yeah, but that's Django right there.
Tom, may I
Yep.
ask a question? I think where I'm most a little fuzzy right now is on the detail.html. I'm trying to wrap my head around how the input works. So we've got a form, and the form is taking some type of input. In this case, it's like a multiple choice. And I'm assuming, like, you know, there's different types of forms out there. Maybe somebody enters a piece of text and they hit enter, but the information on the form is going to go into that request dictionary. Like, I'll be able to ask wherever when somebody submits that form, the data goes to the quote unquote request. And
post
then
request.
I can, okay, the query request. And then that's information that I can then use as the, then I can then use on the following, wherever it takes me, I can then reference that. So that's what that request is.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, you can grab data off of that request and use it as you see fit.
Okay. And I'm naming, like, when in the details.html on line 9, that name choice, that's the key that you're giving it, right? You could name that whatever you want, but that's your key. And the value is choice.id, which is the actual, like, from the database stuff or what, right? Like, okay, I think I'm following that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. I'm going to